I was watching the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and something came to mind. Legolas, son of Tharanduil, is by our standards Crown Prince of Mirkwood. But why would he have such a title? Why would he be considered important at all? The reason a Crown Prince is important is because he will someday be king. However, Tolkien elves are immortal. The son of the king will likely never rule. Lothlorien had 3 leaders for the entirety of its 5-millennium history. A royal would either have to set out on their own to found their own kingdom, or take up a craft to do something, as they will never get the throne. Then there is the obvious fact that immortals would definitely not follow primogeniture. When your king could possibly rule for eternity, there is no way you'll put out the firstborn son by default. In fact, Tolkien knew this, even if he didn't acknowledge it explicitly. No elven kingdom in the Silmarillion passed via primogeniture. Well, partly it was because Morgoth or Sauron smashed them to pieces. You clearly had the worthiest heir chosen. Most notably, it was Elrond who received the leadership of the Noldor when Gil-galad died, despite them being only second cousins once removed in law. This got me thinking about elven immortality. This would have a profound impact on pretty much every aspect of society. First, I'd like to point out how much of our current society is based around aging and inheritance. Much of our labor goes to either raising children or investing for retirements. Neither of these would be a major concern for raising immortals. First, as many writers have discussed, children would be far fewer and more rare. To avoid massive overpopulation, each generation might have 2 to 4 children over the course of their infinite lives. And this would represent a near permanent addition to the population outside of war. Therefore, childrearing would clearly be a much smaller part of society. However, also, apprenticeships under the parents wouldn't be nearly as common. After all, the point of Smith and Son is that the son will take over the smithy when dad gets too old. When you can have 6 generations of children working the family business, with a great to the 4th grandfather still in his prime, there's no chance of advancement for any of the children. Also, war would be a far, far more costly proposition to elves. Consider how pre-industrial civilizations had a much more nonchalant approach to death than our current era. They knew that any cut could get infected and mean death. So death was not nearly so much of a concern as it is for us, where anyone in good health can reasonably expect to live until their 70s. Therefore, it was easier for them to throw their lives away for a worthy cause. On the other hand, if you could expect to live forever, going to war is an extremely costly proposition. Unless there was a desire to get rid of overpopulation, there is no way that elves are going to war without a very good reason. Coming back to retirement, you have 2 possible scenarios. In an elf-only society, retirement probably wouldn't be a reasonable norm, as you would need to have sufficient numbers of workers to run society. However, excess wealth that wouldn't need to be put into raising children or saving for retirement would build up. It could lead to hyperinflation or mass spending on luxuries such as art. Society could easily plunge into decadence, as there is literally no reason to think too much on tomorrow. Similarly, younger generations could become discontented, as they would have literally no method for advancing company or political ranks. The boss won't ever retire or die. Indeed, I don't think the corporate hierarchies would work in the same way because of this. Large corporations or political groups might not be sustainable, as the best people would constantly leave to find their own businesses or kingdoms just so they could be in charge for once. On the other hand, if you have a mix of elves and mortals in a single society, you get into an interesting situation. Mortals would, theoretically, have a similar situation to our own, with work, investment, retirement, and inheritance. However, elves would build up resources early in life, retire, and then be able to live on the fruits of their first century of labor near indefinitely. They wouldn't have the massive financial drains of poor health to worry about, so you would develop a class of immortals who could hold middle-class, decent-paying jobs, work for a century, and then live in comfort for the next eon. They also wouldn't endear the respect we give to our current elders, as they are more than capable of continuing to work. They just have no need to. The class warfare that could result from this imbalance would be great to see explored. I confess, I am enamored with the modern high fantasy genre, despite how rarely it's done well. And it'd be interesting to see how this dynamic would work if it was fully explored. On the other hand, in the urban fantasy genre, this definitely explains why all the immortals seem to be either corporate overlords or idle busybodies with no day job. Anyway, thanks for listening to my idle musings about just how different society would be if we didn't have to worry about aging or death. Thanks for listening, y'all.